to our last presentation for the day. Thanks again, Josh, for that presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. So we'll move on to Dr. Kevin Chase. He's a research entomologist with Bartlett Tree Research Laboratory, and he's going to talk to us today about recent insect pest arrivals to the southeast. So take it away when you're ready.
Hey, Drew, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect.
And we can see, and we can see your presentation.
Wonderful. Well, thanks everybody for inviting me. There's been some really lovely talks. I'm going to be moving a bit away from the plant talks and moving into the invasive insect world. So, of course, one of the big ones we're going to be talking today about is emerald ash borer, as that has showed up in North Carolina fairly recently. But I also would like to point out some other fairly scary invasive insects coming. So one of the first questions that I usually like to think about is, why am I giving the talk that I've been asked to give? And why do we have these kind of talks in general? Why do we talk about invasive species so much? Kind of ironic, but I gave a talk about Asian longhorn beetle and a few other insects to the Tree South Carolina meeting in March 28th, 2019. And I talked about Asian longhorn beetle. And, some people were like, why are we talking about Asian longhorn beetle? There's small populations in New York and in Ohio, but that's nowhere close to us. Well, sure enough, about a year later, a year and a couple months later, this insect showed up in Charleston, South Carolina, and now there is a well-established population of this insect, specifically in Hollywood, which is right outside of Charleston. So by no means am I saying I'm a prophet. It's just the worst kind of ironic thing that there is. But invasive species are invasive for a reason. Usually they require low tropical pressure. That just means low numbers in order to establish later. And that goes for plants and animals, whether that's, we're talking about seeds, and then the different dispersal mechanisms. So for a lot of the boring insects, like emerald ash borer, like Asian longhorn beetle, they travel in firewood very well. They travel in shipping material very well. So not totally surprising to see this kind of boring insect move to Charleston. But this is what I just want to point out. I'm not going to talk about this any longer, but this is in Charleston, not, that's a neighboring state to us. So if you see a very beautiful black and white insect that looks like this, please report it to a county extension agent. When it comes to invasive insects, with globalization worldwide, we import so much material throughout the United States, both on the West Coast and the East Coast. But something that's really fascinating is that our eastern forests resemble European forests and Asian forests from a general level standpoint, that there's so many species that arrive here and are able to latch on to a very similar tree that's familiar to them. So when they get off the boat, per se, they're able to infest those species, but those species haven't co-evolved with these pests, so therefore they don't have the defensive mechanisms in order to defend themselves against these. So, here's just a range of pests. Cyrus noctilio is a wood wasp that infests pines. There are no native pines to the southern hemisphere, but where pine plantations are planted in the southern hemisphere, so that's South Africa, all throughout South America, Australia, New Zealand, this insect has invaded there. It's a very good invader at establishing those pine plantations, and it's also established in the Northeast right now. And there's many other insects. I'll talk about a few of them throughout this talk, but just, there's always the question of what is the next scary invasive species coming on the ship. And I think it's worth considering. I'm not here to give a big fearful talk and try to scare the crap out of everybody. But, it is something that's occurring really on a daily basis. So let's get into emerald ash borer. This is one that really is relevant. This map is a little outdated. There's some more updated maps. But you can see that in North Carolina, this insect is quite well established. And if you've driven I-85 anytime recently, I take that between, Charlotte and going east, quite often you will see large patches of dead ash trees. And thanks a lot to Josh for that, showing, a forest edge line with dead ash trees. It's a sad sight to see. I'm from Pennsylvania, so I've seen it there for quite a while. I just moved from the Twin Cities of Minnesota, where it has the emerald ash borer has showed up fairly recently, and it's starting to be devastating. But if you've got a chance to drive through any of the Midwestern forests where this insect has been established for more than 20 years, we're talking, almost a total canopy loss of ash, which, in a lot of wetland areas, black ash is a very keystone species to that type of ecosystem. So this is truly a devastating insect. Again, I'm not here to fearmonger anybody, but if there was one invasive insect that truly scares me, it is this one, both on an urban landscape standpoint and from a true forest standpoint. And it is a true tree killer. So on the urban landscape, this is the type of scenario that we can expect to see for any trees that are not treated. So this photo was taken by Dan Herms, who was with the Ohio State University when this photo was taken. He's now with Davy Tree Experts. And this can happen over a period of 2 to 3 years. So wherever you live in North Carolina or outside of North Carolina, if you have this type of street situation where your urban alleyways are lined with ash trees, in a matter of 2 to 3 years, you can see dead trees like this. So, there's always the question of, do we treat these trees or do we remove all of them? Do we remove some of them? Do we just treat some of them? And those are all things that are worth discussing from an economic standpoint and from my standpoint, even more importantly, from a safety standpoint. Ash trees become very brittle and very dangerous quite quickly. So that's an important thing to consider when we're talking about this insect. Just wanted to talk about a little bit about the life cycle. It is semi-voltine, which means that it takes 2 years to complete its life cycle. In the spring, they'll pupate and then start to emerge. Late spring, summer, the emergence coincides with the flowering of black locust. So that's what we call a plant phenological indicator. So we can kind of correlate what we're seeing in the landscape from a plant standpoint to when these insects are emerging. By late spring, summer, almost all of the adults have come out. The adults actually have to feed on the leaf tissue in order to sexually mature, and then they lay the eggs on the outside of the bark. Those eggs will hatch, and then the first larval instar will start to bore into the tree. The first couple larval instars will stay out in the phloem, and by the third and fourth instars, they will actually bore into the xylem and deep into the wood. And as they are feeding on that phloem, they're essentially girdling the tree, right? So, I mean, it's the same thing as if we took a chainsaw, or a silky, and we literally cut into that tree, and we are cutting off the ability for that tree to, move nutrients and water up and down through that tree. And then once it gets into the xylem, we're really interfering with the way that tree can, move those nutrients and water from the roots to the shoots. So totally dependent on how bad the infestation is and what the infestation levels are locally in the environment of how quickly that tree declines. But one of the hardest parts about this insect is, from an identification standpoint of an infested tree, is it starts in the very upper canopy of the tree and then works its way down. So by the time that you see a scenario where at eye level you're seeing some exit holes, you're seeing these galleries, that tree has been infested probably for a couple years, and that those insects will work their way down. So if you see that, the likelihood of that tree surviving, even if you try to treat it at that level of infestation, there's very, very little hope for that. So from a treatment standpoint, from a management standpoint, if we're going to have the objective to keep that tree in our landscape, or if it's a border tree in the forest, we need to be treating these trees preventatively, not once they become infested. If you see just a little bit of branch dieback, we can do those treatments. I should say the industry can do those treatments. But the general rule is, once it gets beyond 30% canopy dieback, we really don't recommend treatments, because it's very likely that 50% of the tree at least has been affected, and you won't see that residual effect until the following year. So it just becomes very difficult to manage that tree beyond that point. So these are some symptoms of attack. So as I mentioned, it kind of starts in the upper canopy. If somebody asked me to guess how long this tree has been infested for, I would probably guess, at least 2 or 3 years, because we're already seeing the canopy die back here, and this one major leader is already starting to decline. And it's quite likely that the other parts of this canopy are affected, and that the larvae are feeding on those limbs. So the upper third of the tree will die back first, followed really by the rest of the tree the next year or the following year. You'll then see what we call epicormic shoots or sprouts emerging below the dead portions of the trunk. This is just the tree's way of trying to live, trying to go on, trying to create enough foliage to get energy to then reproduce, to put out a seed set. It's kind of a last-ditch effort for the tree to survive. And then the canopy continues to decline until the tree fully succumbs. Once you start seeing that canopy die back, it happens pretty quickly. This is, just commonly what you see. It's actually pretty rare to find an adult. I've been studying wood-boring insects for 12 years, and I have not found an adult. A lot of our arborists with barley tree experts send me pictures all the time of the adults, and I always get so jealous. But removing the trunk or the bark off the tree, removing it from the trunk, you will see these frasts, which is just a nice word for poo, packed galleries, and these serpentine kind of S-shaped galleries. And if you're lucky enough, maybe the insect as well. So one of the questions that I get very often is this going to be forever? Are we ever going to see a point where emerald ash borer just takes out all of the trees in the forest, takes out all of the trees in the urban canopy except those that have been treated? And is there a point where we can actually stop treating trees because these populations will just crash? And my answer, at least for the very moment, is this insect is going to be around forever. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is that this insect can infest saplings. So you kind of have to think like a forest ecologist. Once this insect sweeps through a forest canopy and kills all of them, well, what do you have? Well, now you have a whole bunch of sunlight that's able to reach the forest floor. And because ash is native to our forest, there's a pretty decent seed set waiting in that soil. So, with proper moisture, with proper sunlight, you're going to get seedlings to grow up. Of course, there's going to be other things like red maple, and depending on where you're at, many other species that will be competing for that sunlight and that water resource, but ash will certainly come up. And I saw cases in Minnesota where I saw saplings the size of my thumb infested with emerald ash borer. So there's kind of always going to be this host resource availability until that seed source runs out. The other thing is and this is reason number 2, is that clients, they get the impression of, I've been treating my tree for 12, 16, 18, 20 years. And we have real world examples of this in the Midwest. And they say, you know what? All the trees are dead. Emerald ash borer certainly can't be around any longer. So I'm going to stop treating my tree. And we literally have heartbreaking cases where people have been paying, every other year. So they paid for 10 injections of the product that is used commonly in our industry. And then their tree succumbs and dies just because they just thought they didn't need to anymore. So for the moment, I'm going to say this is forever. There is the question of, there's 4 different species of parasitoids that are being released, mostly by the federal government. Some state agencies are getting involved with those releases. That's not currently privately available for our industry, the arboricultural industry, to purchase these parasitoids and release, on clients' properties. But the good news is that they're starting to see some recapture rates of some species, depending on the areas. And the important thing with having all 4 different parasitoid species is that they parasitize different life stages. So, there's some parasitoids with a very short ovipositor. That's just the segment that the female injects whether it's the egg or the larval stage or the pupal stage. And that depends on how big the tree is and how thick that bark is. So it's great to have a suite of parasitoids. At this point, I'm not confident that these parasitoids are going to control this invasive insect, but over the long term, if we have a low population of them, can they somehow form an equilibrium where emerald ash borer is less of a threat to kill trees? I think there's some potential, but that's to be determined. So at this point, is this going to be forever? My answer is yes, but maybe there's hope somewhere else. The last thing I want to talk about with emerald ash borer, just from a safety standpoint, is I mentioned this earlier, these trees become extremely brittle. So, if you're an arborist or if you're a homeowner and you start to have a tree decline, this tree is certainly not completely dead yet. But from an industry standard, we say, and there's literally, it's not just me saying, it's not just people saying, but there's actually legal rules protecting climbers that they are not allowed to climb ash trees that are infested with emerald ash borer because these trees become so brittle. And very sadly and unfortunately, in our industry, there's mortalities every year from companies trying to climb these trees, and mortalities occur. So by all means, please, if you're a homeowner, do not allow, whatever tree company you hire to say, yes, I'll climb that tree. It really needs to be removed with a bucket truck or felling those trees. All right, moving on. I want to talk about a few others that you should at least be aware of. So Japanese cedar longhorn beetle is another non-native wood-boring insect. It showed up in New England, specifically around Rhode Island, and this insect will infest any member of the Cupressaceae. So a lot of my mind is thinking about the urban environment right now. So, we have a lot of arborvitae, we have a lot of cryptomeria in the urban landscape. Some junipers, maybe less cedars, but especially for those arborvitaes and cryptomerias, I see this pretty commonly. So for a longhorn beetle, it's actually a pretty small insect. And what you're going to look for is kind of this eye-shaped or cat-eye shaped or oval exit hole around the middle of that tree. And the trees that are most likely to succumb or be infested with this insect are trees that are newly planted, and I will go even further and say poorly planted. So these are some trees where the ball and burlap stacks were left on. You can see them already succumbing. And even more specifically, trees that are over-irrigated. So if you have a tree that's either sitting in a low area or just there's way too much water being applied, I just look at that as a greeting card for death, and you are going to invite these insects in. When these insects attack a tree, you're really going to see the top third or the top half of that tree die first, and then the rest of that tree come down. And if it was a scenario where you just had one tree in a row of trees dying, I would remove that tree immediately and then treat the other trees because it's likely that they're infested. So that's just another one that I think it's worth looking out for. In the Research Triangle area, we have 3 offices there, and we've been seeing this insect a lot in those areas. Not so much in the Charlotte area, not so much in the coastal areas, but specifically around the Research Triangle area of North Carolina, we've seen this quite a bit. Red bay ambrosia beetle, this is an absolutely devastating species. Similar to emerald ash borer, this really is one that you should be afraid of. If you're not familiar with this insect, it showed up around Savannah, the port of Savannah, Georgia, and since then has spread just up and down the coast, west as far as Texas. And red bay is a very, very important habitat tree. I mean, it's a keystone species to a lot of the coastal swamp areas. And the most unfortunate thing about this insect is it only takes one of these insects to infest and introduce a fungal component that causes what we call laurel wilt disease that clogs up the vascular system of those trees, and a single female can kill a tree in 4 to 6 weeks. It is unbelievable. This fungus and this insect will attack anything in the Lauraceae family, which includes sassafras. And the other thing about this is the females are parthenogenetic, which means that they don't need to mate in order to reproduce. So from a tropical pressure standpoint, what makes this insect a very good invader is it only takes one female to start a new infestation in the local area. So imagine you were going camping on the coastal area, you wanted to take some firewood from the coastal area back home, it was infested with this insect. Well, you might have just started a new infestation of this insect with only one female or a couple females from that log that you brought home. So please don't move firewood. I'm sure you're all very familiar with that and hear it all the time, but this is just another reason why. Just to point out on a map exactly how far it's spread, this is as recent as November 4th. As you can see, it's mostly in the coastal North Carolina area. We have had a few jumps recently. So it was actually our Bartlett offices in the Nashville area that found the first detections in the Kentucky and the Tennessee sites, and it's spreading pretty quickly. So all of the county counties that you see in this kind of yellow checkered are all the ones that have been detected this year. So, 3 new counties in North Carolina, and this will continue to spread. So, red bay, it kind of stops along these coastal areas, but sassafras and Lindera benzoin or northern spicebush will occur commonly throughout these areas and will allow a pathway to continue spreading north. So by all means, please keep your eyes open for dead sassafras and that look just like this. And if you take back the bark and you see this streaking, that's an indication that that tree is infested with the beetles and with the disease, the laurel disease. So this is kind of that wilting pattern that you see with some other diseases like that. So I want to talk about another pathway. So we talked about just wood packing, solid wood packing material, and moving by firewood. Well, the ornamental plant trade is another really good or really bad pathway to move some pests. Andrew Leopold, he was one of my PhD advisors. He wrote this nice paper about the importance of live plant imports and how it is a major pathway for forest insect and pathogen invasions. And one really in our face example of this recently is box tree moth. So box trees are also we know as boxwoods. This is an invader that invaded the United Kingdom and the European Union quite a few years ago. And boxwoods already have enough problems. We have boxwood blight, Vitello blight. We got boxwood psyllid, boxwood leaf miner. Down the list of problems with boxwoods. It's not my preference to plant these things in an urban landscape, but they're very important for the the historic and traditional Victorian garden. So a lot of people love these plants. Have nice foliage throughout the year with some cultivars, but this is just another new invader. Just to show you how fast it spread in Europe, so it showed up around 2007, and very quickly spread throughout the rest of Europe. So that's one thing that we've been looking out for. This insect showed up in Canada in 2018. Well, guess what? Some nursery in Canada said, hey, we should ship some plants to the US. So 25 different retail facilities in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Michigan, New York, Ohio, and South Carolina, as well as a distribution center in Tennessee, all received plants with that were infested with box tree moth. And that distribution center in Tennessee sent out their plants elsewhere, who knows all where. So this is an insect that my eyes are wide open to. I'm trying to detect this insect, and one that I think is worth y'all looking out for. So pretty distinctive moth. The caterpillar is green, has these black spots with some white markings on it. So if you're looking on the urban landscape and you see any boxwoods that start to have this pattern of defoliation where you just kind of have the mid vein left, by all means, please report it again to your extension agent. This is one that we're truly looking for. There is a pheromone trap that's available for it, so some really nice work went into detecting the sex pheromone, so we can detect these things easier. So, if you work for a county or a municipality, or you're just interested in trapping these insects, there is a trap and sex pheromone that you can use to detect these insects. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about spotted lanternfly. It's likely that you've heard about this in the news. It's an absolutely beautiful insect. Of course, I'm sick, right? I'm an entomologist. I love insects. But this thing is problematic. This thing is showing up very quickly. So it's throughout Pennsylvania where it was first detected. So, now east and west across it. And this is part of the problem with this insect. So when we talk about an infestation, that is an infestation. So, we have people, kind of throw up a little bit when they see this. An infestation is real bad. And beyond this, one of the reasons that it's truly a problem, and I want to make it very clear right here and right now, this is not a tree killing pest. This is not emerald ash borer. This is not red bay ambrosia beetle, but it is truly a nuisance pest. So hopefully I can hit play. Let's see if I can. So if you can hear that, it sounds like it's raining, like there's almost a monsoon. I'm being a bit exaggerated, but that's not rain. That's not water. That's actually honeydew. And honeydew is a really nice word for sugary poop. So these things are sucking into the phloem, pulling out those sugars. Their body can't process all of those sugars, and they excrete those sugars out of their rear end, and that's where we get absolutely just huge amounts of this honeydew and then sooty mold growing on top of that. And it is rancid smelling. When you have that much, it is absolutely rancid smelling. And also from a nuisance pest standpoint, one of the things that happens is you get bees and wasps showing up. So we actually have case situations where there is daycare facilities that have to close down all summer long because there is so much honeydew and so much sugar availability that these bees and wasps became very aggressive, very protective of that sugar resource, and became very aggressive. So just another reason why it's so scary. Again, not a tree killing pest. I want to go down to host trees. So tree of heaven, invasive plant. My gosh, from Pennsylvania's standpoint, tree of heaven is one of the top invading plants there is. Any disturbed site, whether it's roadside, railway side, or just yard disturbance, tree of heaven will show up. That tree exists where this insect is native to, which is Southeast Asia. So when spotted lanternfly arrived, it said, "Hey, great! I'm in Pennsylvania. One of my favorite trees is here. I can easily establish." It will infest willow, but red maple is its secondary primary host. We'll also get on silver maple pretty hard. The one thing that I do really want to point out is it loves vines. So whether it's poison ivy, wild grapes, or cultivated grapes, and we have actually seen mortality occur with grapes. So, I talked about red bay ambrosia beetle earlier. And I said it attacks Lauraceae. Well, what important crop is in Lauraceae? Avocados, right? So our guacamole is a threat. Now we have this insect that attacks grapes. What else is a vine? Hops. So now we have our avocados missing for guacamole, and now we have to worry about our beer and wine industry from this insect. So, our Super Bowl parties going forward are under threat. Sorry, I had to say it, but all jokes aside, this is very worrisome, and this insect is knocking on our doorstep. So as of 2 to 3 weeks ago, they found spotted lanternfly in Carroll County, Virginia, which is just north of Surrey County, and very scary north of the Yadkin Valley. Which, if you're not familiar with the Yadkin Valley, that's one of the more wine-producing regions of North Carolina. So those wine growers are quite scared. And they should be, because this insect will kill those vines. So I know I haven't told a pleasant story. I usually hate giving these talks because people are like, "Man, you're just this depressing guy telling us about all these scary things." But hopefully I brought some knowledge, and hopefully I can answer any questions. So yeah, thanks all for listening. Back to you, Drew.
Thanks, Kevin. That was a very interesting talk. So it looks like we do have one question from John Moss. Have you seen any instance of emerald ash borer inhabiting Chinese privet or white fringe tree? They're in the same family as ashes.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So privet, we have not. I know that's in the Oleaceae. We have not seen that. In American fringe tree, we have. So not a lot of cases of it. I've seen properties where American fringe tree is an ornamental plant on somebody's property, and they also have ashes. So those ashes succumb, and those fringe trees are either very minorly attacked or not attacked at all. But the fear is once all ash trees are succumbed to this insect, that it will then infest those. But then there's also the Chinese fringe tree, which co-evolved with this insect. So they are actually, we'll call them highly tolerant. I won't say fully resistant, but highly tolerant of that insect. Sorry, Drew, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Looks like that was the only question that came in. So if anybody has any other questions, go ahead and put them down there in the chat now. So it looks like we're right at noon, which is what the ending time on our agenda was for today. So I guess we'll go ahead and start the wrap up portion. I don't see any questions coming in. So I guess first I want to thank, North Carolina, DNCR, their IT people, Ben, Carl, and Philip. We definitely would not have been able to put this meeting on without their help and without their assistance, and doing some practice sessions for our presenters, making sure that everybody was able to get their presentation going, and we're going to have any snafus. And then I want to thank Owen and Jonathan for helping us to plan this this symposium. I know it got pushed off a couple times, but we kind of banded together and really put our foot in the ground. And also want to thank the board as well. They were super helpful in recruiting speakers and getting everything lined up. Also want to thank all of the presenters from yesterday and today. Thank you for your time. All the talks were very interesting. Definitely learned quite a bit. And then want to say thank you to everybody that attended. Thank you for your time. And we hope that you, over the last 2 days, you were able to, learn something new. Just thank you again, for attending the meeting. One thing I do want to mention, the CEUs for the pesticide credits. I will go ahead and post that in the chat one more time. So make sure before you log off that you, sign up for that. And then I will, compile all that and send that over to the Department of Ag. I know our course got approved, but I don't know what credit, what credits, what categories, and for how many hours. But as soon as we know, we will try to let everybody know. The links for yesterday's session and today's session will be emailed out, like Jonathan said, by the end of this week. And with that, we're going to have a survey that we would like for everyone to fill out and email it back. Basically, just kind of help us, figure out what we did, what was good, what was bad, what we can improve on. So yeah, that'll be emailed out, and we would like for you to give us some feedback on that. One other thing, we still have our treasurer position open. So if you're interested in that, let us know. And if you're interested in, just joining the board as an at-large member, we're always, looking for that kind of membership as well. And I don't think there's anything else that I know of, Jonathan, if you have anything. And if not, thanks everybody again. And we will be sending the links out soon along with the survey. And hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. It's beautiful outside. So hopefully everybody's able to enjoy some outdoor time this afternoon. And thanks again.